We were first introduced by us. Hellmann's Mayonnaise, Nestle's products, Maxwell House Coffee, Post Toasties, Good Luck and Imperial Margarine, Red Star Yeast, Borden Dairy Products, Smucker's Products, and Yoplait yogurt, as well as many others. So that was kind of an interesting part of our retail towards the end of the era of the food distributor servicing the grocery stores. Okay. Catch up with myself here. So, as the business grew, in about 2 years after we started our food service business, we'd outgrown our facility at 416 Harrison Street. And so we decided to build a new facility, and that's when we started construction in 1961 on a building on West River Drive in Davenport. In 1962, we moved in that facility, and our sales at that at that time, was $1.5 million in sales. So that was back then it seemed like an awful lot of business. And that's as far as I'm taking the program, other than the fact I had a couple footnotes I wanted to mention. One was that during this time, my mother was a graduate of Augustana and worked for Rock Island Bridge and Iron, did all of the financial statements from way back up until 1962. So she was doing all that in the background, but it was also part of the business, as well as my wife Mary, who was involved in doing aesthetic things and so forth, and she worked in setting up the offices and getting the right office furniture and so forth, both in the building in 1961 and our later building as well. And it was interesting that in 1962, she was down, I got a picture of it all, her painting one of the desks, very pregnant. Very pregnant. And guess who? 1962, Tom was born. So that was about the extent of, I don't know if we want to show that. This is another interesting fact that we kind of lose track of time and money. Here was a payroll in 1933, 7 employees, $117 for the total payroll that week. That equates to, on the inflation calculator, $2,087 in today's money. So this is our little point of interest there I'd like to bring. I'm going to turn the program over to Mike. Good job. Good afternoon. Well, I'm going to pick up from there, and actually, just first comment would be is what my father, grandfather, and great-grandfather had set up was basically the foundation, what was to grow and continue to be a very viable company. And so, whether it be the new buildings, whether it be the employees, the culture of the business, they were working and setting the stage for what we were to become and grow into more. As he mentioned before, the society change in the eras in the time period that I'm going to be talking about, that I'll call it the stomach share or whatever, continued to change into the restaurants, heavier into restaurants versus the grocery stores. The grocery stores were still around, still growing, but the restaurants were growing at a faster pace. As he mentioned, the independents grocery stores were starting to diminish, and there was the larger stores like the Eagles and Geekman's and that sort of thing, which we'll see. So real quick with my history of myself, and even though it's not in the time period that I'm going to be talking about, but just to let a little more about myself. I joined the business in 1976, and actually really against my father's will. He'd set the policy that the kids should go away to college for 4 years, work for somebody else. Well, school really wasn't my thing. And so when he was out of town, at one point I went and applied for a job and started working there. So my first job was washing trucks and doing that type of manual labor, and primarily on the third shift. Some on the first, but primarily on the third shift.
And so then I moved into the warehouse and started, and we'll get into some of these pictures, I guess can relate to it. But then I moved into the warehouse on third shift, and I think he was getting even with me, and he put me in the freezer. And so for 2.5 years, I worked third shift in the freezer, picking orders for the customers. Finally, I think my mother got to him and said, hey, you got to let him out and have a little bit of a social life. So I got out of that and moved into the day shift, helping receive product in versus shipping it out. From there, I ended up going into the office, working in purchasing a little bit. I helped start the produce department and selling produce. And as years went on, we expanded our product lines. And the produce department, then paper buyer, helped with a few construction projects. Went back and did inventory control out in the warehouse. Then I had to go back to third shift actually to get some experience managing people and managed all three inbound or outbound for the third shift. Then finally ended up taking over, actually in charge of the warehouse in both shifts. And then Chief Operating Officer, VP of Operations, we've got in charge of all the drivers in warehouse, both in and out, product in and out of the business on a daily basis. At the end in 2002, there was about 250 employees that I would manage. So it was quite a few. I see Bowie here, and of course, involved with labor negotiations also is a very good challenge. I learned a lot about that over the years. So we had that. So that's a little bit about my history. And I have down here on the slide, of course, as my wife, because I did meet my wife at TPC. So, and that will come farther into this deal, but so there is a bit of history even for my wife at TPC. As my father mentioned, in 1962, Bill started in construction in 61, moved in 62. It was TPC's 75th anniversary in business, and moving into this building. And so that was quite a big milestone. It was a big undertaking. I once again can relate to it a little bit and jumping forward. When my father bought this land and built this building, my grandfather was quite nervous and he had told my father several times, you're going to bankrupt us. This is a big purchase. When we built the one in Andalusia Road, I was in charge of that, and my father told me the same thing. So, fortunately, neither one of us were too far off. So we entered into the new building. In 1964, once again, the restaurant business was expanding, and we needed to compete with the larger food service distributors out there. Now we're known by Sysco, US Foods, etc. And we were actually joined and helped found a buying organization called Nugget. It was based in Stockton, California. It is made up of a group of independent distributors like ourselves. Primarily at this point, most of them were there was a number of them in the Midwest, in Omaha and Waterloo and ourselves and that sort of thing. But the canning it was based around canned goods. The canning was done out in California, Northern California. So the Nugget Corporation was formed out in California. But what it does allowed us to buy product as a group, collectively, in more volume. Just like you see now today with the big stores and everything else, the bigger, the more price, the better price you get. Same philosophy here. It was a purchasing group made up of a number of distributors that could go to the manufacturers, whether it be Campbell's or Heinz or whoever it was, and buy at a good price. We used the label Nugget. The name of the corporation at that time was Nugget. The label was used, it was called Nugget, so we could market it as our own. So we joined that in '64. In '66, once again, sales were continuing to grow quite fast. And when I say quite fast, obviously you can see in 4 years, we better than doubled the volume. In today's, once again, as you'll see in the chart, the sales volume grew a lot faster than that later on, but when you start doubling in that short period of time, it's tough to deal with. So we needed to add on to the building again. 4 years after the first building, we needed to add on. We added about 20,000 square feet of dry warehouse. It cost about $103,000 to build that. You think about that. We did go a little bit taller. Technology kept on going, talking about taller. Part of the reason, not just when I talk about growth, is also in product lines. You know, like Father talked about is, you know, one time there were 80 different line items, and put it in perspective of the whole time period, we had over 12,000 different items when we sold the business. So as we went into more restaurants, they had bigger demand for different products. The manufacturers were developing a lot of products, pushing them through us. And so we needed more space just also because of different products, whether it be styrofoam cups, whether it be different canned goods, dry goods, that sort of thing, to handle the customer's needs. Leads into customer service. Once again, he instilled on us at that point customer service and taking care of the customer, and the profits and that sort of thing will take care of itself if you do that. Once again, bringing in items that the customers needed. At one time we had like 15 different barbecue sauces, different brands. There's a few brokers in the room, I think, here that sold those to us. So, so that's, once again, the customer service. We took that differentiation from some of our larger competitors and bringing in the products that the customers were looking for in service. Along with that, of course, there's still a lot of hard work and setting that foundation like I talked about. My father would go in a lot of weekends and do his buying, catching up on paperwork, look at the financials, etc. And of course, at that age, I am around, but I'm fairly young. But he would take us along with him. And I remember he'd have to find something to keep me busy while he was working. So I had a garbage can that he gave me and a broom and that sort of thing. It was go sweep the warehouse, straighten up the pallets. And so, you know, 8, 9, 10 years old, that was, if you want to maybe call that my first job at TBC, but was cleaning the warehouse. But, so, once again, 1968, sales has continued to grow. Restaurant sales were growing, continued to grow fast. So my father talked about the retail and the manufacturers there wanting us to call on the retail accounts to push their products. And of course, the manufacturers wanted to go to the restaurants and could push theirs. We decided to split the sales departments. So we had a retail department and a food service department. Restaurants, institutional, whichever you want to call it. And so here's some pictures of back the two different sales departments back then. It was a very insightful, once again, setting that foundation, very insightful thought process in growing the business. We were still growing the retail. It was still, once again, growing, so we wanted to grow, split it up, the two sales areas, and have their specialty items, different types of products they were selling. Another interesting fact or issue they came up with was that I didn't really realize until this building this speech, but they had the building financed and everything else, but this business is very capital intense, very cash when you're with inventory and receivables. And they found a company, Prudential Life Insurance, Prudential Insurance, that actually did a line of credit and financed the inventory, used that line of credit to finance the inventory and the receivables. So it was a very intuitive and leading type of way of financing. So we were able to manage the growth of the inventory along with the building, the physical part of the building, and of course the employees were growing at that same time. They also offered professional help in managing. They would come in periodically throughout the years, the year, and help with look at your books, help with management style and that sort of thing, and give you some insightful information from their point of view. So it was a great tool to have. Product depth, as I mentioned, you can see there's a picture of, we see a lot of outdoor pictures outside of the warehouse. Here's the inside of the expanded warehouse, the type of racking systems we have, and the product, how we store the product. But boy, the product lines continued to grow quite fast to meet the customer's needs. 1969, we're at 3.5 million. We needed another addition.